Before I get into PII, I want to introduce the concept that you may already be aware of Kaizen. And it's the concept of continuous improvement. And when I think about IT strategies, IT security, I always think about what you need to do today, what you need to do tomorrow, and what you've done yesterday may not suffice for the future. So if you're doing the same thing in your IT strategies as you're doing a year ago, you're doing something wrong. So it's something that we think about at Payroll Network and throughout the organization. So it's not just a IT thing. That's my area of specialty. That's the thing I care most about. But it's the idea that everyone should have this feedback loop to get involved, to think about how we're doing our processes. Are we doing processes that make sense for the future? Get employees involved. Invite their feedback. Ask them what they think, how the organization, how processes should be adapted for what's going on, what's coming down the pike. Particularly with IT, it's so hard to kind of stay focused, stay current. So just a constant eyeball in the future, I think, really is going to help you with your strategies. So just to talk a little bit about, I'm not going to really get into a whole lot of IT strategy, but I just want to kind of bring up some components that we think about at Payroll Network in our protection strategy and talk about how PII falls into it. So we have a few different layers that we consider. The first thing is we like to make sure that content from the web is filtered. So we have filters on our email systems. We have filtering on websites with perimeter security, firewalls, access controls. So you think about our password policies. Multi-factor authentication is just, you have to do multi-factor authentication in today's world. It's so important that you're not just relying on a username and password for your security. It's so simple to turn on just a text to your phone. Some applications have authenticator apps. You need that extra layer of security because it is too easy with phishing scams these days for people's email credentials or credentials to other sites to get compromised. But with multi-factor authentication, you have that extra layer of protection. They need to have your device, they need to have that key fob, they need to have that authenticator app to get in. As a part of access control, personally identifiable information, PII. So what I mean by that, do your folks have the right access to information? In your payroll HR systems, are you providing people with more access to PII than they really need? So you just got to think about the right levels of access in your systems. Encryption of data, at-rest database security, in-transit security. How are you dealing with communicating with clients and vendors? Are you sending around spreadsheets that are unencrypted with personally identifiable information in it? You shouldn't be. So, again, PII kind of hits a lot of different layers. Endpoint device protection, of course, everyone needs their antivirus and malware tools today. Other things to think about as far as your IT protection, patching policies with Windows, sunsetting legacy systems. Are you running old systems? A lot of us have to run older software for whatever reasons. How do you address their compatibility with Windows? Different versions of Windows are sunset by Microsoft over time. So just thinking about how you deal with older systems. Backup and recovery. This is a huge concern of ours, particularly right now. So, are you able to run your business if you're not able to go to the office? Have you tested your recovery? So maybe you do backups, but have you ever actually done a simulation of your business not being available? People at your business not being available? You've got to test that stuff. And then the last bullet I have here is just user education. And to me, this is the most important part. So I think all of the other stuff is valuable, but at the end of the day, your people are the most important aspect of controlling your information. Are your people are vulnerable to social engineering. It's easy for people to want to be helpful and get scammed because they think they got an email that is in their inbox that looks like it's from their CEO or their CFO, but it's not. They didn't look closely at the email. We've heard issues where clients have had their W-2 information exposed because their HR person got an email, and in the subject it said, I need information. The front line, the name of the owner of the company, that's information is on LinkedIn. And so we've heard of clients that, HR person gets an email, I need information, is subject, it's from the CEO, it looks like it, closer look, you can see that it's actually a different email address. I'm traveling, I'm not available, can you send me W-2s, I'm doing an audit. A lot of HR people would be like, oh yeah, I want to take care of this, I'm going to send out this information. So have you talked to your staff about how they need to protect your data? User education is really important in today's world with email threats. So people want to be helpful, and hackers, malicious actors, people like that will take advantage of people's desire to be helpful. So you specifically got to think about people that have fiduciary responsibilities. We see all the time, our controller gets invoices from, made-up companies. Send money to this address, please wire this information. The other day, our phone vendor sent her an invoice by email, and the vendor didn't put a lot of information and just included an invoice, and the controller sent it to me and said, hey, is this a valid request? And I said, actually it is, and I need to talk to our phone vendor about the way that they present that data. But I was glad that our controller asked the question. So people that have responsibility for HR, personal information, fiduciary responsibilities, those folks should be targeted for education. So let's talk more about PII specifically. So why should you worry? Well, just think of it as from a people relations perspective. You've got your employees are the most valuable asset in most organizations, right? You spend so much time recruiting talent, developing talent, training talent. You want your people to feel valuable. You want them not to have any concerns about their information that you maintain in the system. You have an obligation to make sure that their information that you have on them is secure. If it were to get into the wrong hands, it's so easy to do identity theft if you know the employee's name, address, social security number, date of birth, all this information that you probably have on your employees because you need it in order to pay them. You need that HR information. So you should just be thinking about how are you protecting that data? What does it mean from an employer relationship perspective? You have a responsibility to safeguard it. And there are regulations that may apply. So those that are in the healthcare space are going to have to worry about HIPAA regulations and other regulations that may be out there. So what is PII? The Department of Labor has this definition, which I'm not going to read to you. I'm going to give you some bullet points here in a second. And they talk about the responsibilities that you guys have as employers to protect that data. Your responsibility is to have a security plan. Contractors have responsibilities to respect the confidentiality of the information. It's got to be safeguarded. It need to have written approval before that information is shared. So kind of just a little bit more simplistically, at all times, you got to make sure that social, bank account numbers, passport, driver's license information, credit card information, that should definitely be secured at all times for your employees. Think about also, what would be the risk if other types of data were compromised? Their name, their address, their cities, all of that information. They may not be able to perpetrate identity theft with this information, but if they know this information, it's going to be a lot easier for malicious actors to do social engineering. So now they can sort of use this information to facilitate scamming people. What do we see as mistakes that people do with PII? I think the biggest thing is using email to send data without any encryption. So if you don't already know, there's no inherent security on email. So you should consider having a secure email service. Office 365 has a solution. We use a company called FileGuardian at Payroll Network. If you don't have a secure email system, think about if you're sending data to your HR payroll vendor, are you putting a password on the file? In Excel, when you go to save a file, you have an option to put a password. You can do that with a zip file as well. So you don't necessarily need to go invest, although I recommend it, in a secure email system. You can do basic things by just putting passwords on files. And that's better than nothing at all. So we just see all the time, and it's probably because we're in the payroll HR space. Oh, I'm sorry, yeah.
Where would you put like data classification, data retention, so you don't have a company decide to retain the company's information for 25 years?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So what are your policies? So what we do is we have policies on how we retain our clients' data, so that they're aware that we will keep their data until they tell us to destroy it. I think as an employer, you have to think about what you want your vendors to do and what you're doing yourself. So do you inform your employees that you're going to keep their data forever? Do you keep it for 7 years? Come up with a policy that makes sense and then apply it internally and apply it to your vendors. That's a great question, because right now, as you know, like, nothing really goes away on the internet. It's just always there. But from your employee's perspective, they may really not appreciate having just their information held by vendors in perpetuity. So come up with a policy and then apply it to yourself, apply it to your vendors. Just other mistakes we see, phishing emails, like I mentioned a moment ago. More than one time I've heard of HR people sending out W-2 information because they thought the email they got was legitimately from their CEO or CFO. They weren't paying close attention to it. People go on LinkedIn. They know who your controller is. They know who your HR person is. They know who your president is. It's really easy to create an email, a spoofing email that looks like it's from somebody just by changing the name. Train your people, tell them, I'm never going to ask you for any PII by email. That should just be a policy that you have. Tell your people that you would never do that. If they ever have a question, pick up the phone. Give me a voice call. Our company owner was traveling in China before all this virus stuff, so right before it. So he was in China right around the New Year, and he was having problems accessing his email. And so I'm getting these texts, and I'm like, I'm having a little question. Like, I know Charlie, I trust Charlie, but I'm getting texts, and he's in China, and so we weren't able to get our time zones aligned. It's like a 12-hour time difference. But Charlie started to send me voice text. That just gave me a level of assurance. And it was just, he just needed very basic information. He wasn't asking for any PII. He just wanted to reach out on a couple of things. And I'm like, I'm getting a text from our owner. It sounds like Charlie, but I said, Charlie, just to make sure, can you give me a little bit more reassurance that it's you? So, hey, Nick, I got a little voice text from him. Train your people that if they have that instinct that, this maybe isn't quite right, to ask for just a voice verification. Give me a call. Come and visit me in person. Let them know that you're not going to ask for this information. And if the occasion does happen where you need your W-2s for your employees, go ask them in person. Don't send them an email. Do that in-person voice verification. So yeah, don't use standard email without any encryption. Train your people about the threats that are going on with spoofing and phishing. Tell them what the expectations are that you would have from them. Are you going to ask your accountant to pay an invoice by email? I mean, maybe you are, but maybe there's some parameters around how you would do that. Maybe you don't wire money. I would say never initiate a funds transfer by email alone. Ask for a voice verification. Have a policy around how you cut checks. Maybe you cut checks and they go out at Payroll Network. It's a little old-fashioned, but we actually cut checks. And we do it, and then we wait a day to mail the checks. And I'd rather have that paper check go out a day later than a wire. But doing wire transfers, once that money's gone, it's really hard to get back. You think you're wiring your vendor. Your vendor's been hacked, so now someone else is sending you something asking for a wire. Wires are instantaneous, and once it's gone, good luck getting it back.
That got to be a particular problem a few years ago in the real estate industry.
Oh yeah?
People getting involved in closings, and they could send fake transfer information to a closing agent, and tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars being transferred.
It's such a great point. So I did a refi back here a couple years ago, and I was just shocked. I got this great rate. I was really happy with the lender I was working with, and he's like, email me this, email me that. I'm like, are you kidding me? You want me to send you hundreds of pages of my social, my name, address, bank account information? So I put them on, our secure email service. So we have a secure email service. Yes, it applies to your personal, it applies to your organization, but it also applies to your relationships that you have outside of your organization, your bank, your lenders, people you may work with. But yeah, real estate, and I feel like because of all the fraud that happened recently with real estate lenders, that they are improving their processes. You're seeing, I've had a friend who recently went through a closing, and they were able to do a lot of things with DocuSign, and they had an online portal to exchange files. That's the other thing, if you don't have a secure email service, there are online portals that you can use that do document security. So Dropbox has security, but you got to be careful with those things too, because we see phishing emails all the time that look like Dropbox. So I always like that second factor. I'm going to send you an email with an invoice, but I'm going to call you and tell you that to pay it. It's just another layer because it's too easy to impersonate people by email. What other mistakes do we see? Oh, this is like my little pet peeve. Not securing printouts. So I'll go visit a client. We'll be talking about their HR payroll implementation, and their desk just have stacks of PII. I get my payroll reports and I print them all out. I'm like, okay, why are you printing all this stuff? You can just search the PDF. But that's fine. People like to print. I get it. Put it in a drawer. Lock it up. So is your HR department locking up that information every night? Do you have a clean desk policy? Our CEO's his desk is just completely clear at the end of the night, and that sets the standard for everyone in the organization. So we know that it really, you see how these cultural things start at the top. So if you're expecting your HR people to not have all of your employees' information printed out, all your payroll reports printed out and spread out, look at your own desk. And someone once told me, a cluttered desk is a sign of genius. And I'm like, yeah, I don't think so. I think it's just a sign of disorganization. And I get it. We're all so busy. It's nice to have printouts sometimes to be able to reference. But are you setting the example by keeping that information organized? Yeah.
Do you also do clean desk audits?
Yeah. So you got to enforce these things. Yeah. And that's that's key, because if you don't enforce it, then what's the point of having a policy? So what are the consequences? How do you hold yourself and your employees accountable? We don't like to kind of go after our employees, but I think when I explain to folks, just, from the heart, hey, what if that was your information out there? Yes, we know our cleaning company, they're nice people, but do you really know them?
And what about things as simple as like a census and talking to the broker because you're getting your renewals up for your benefits and sending a spreadsheet, an Excel spreadsheet with census information happens all the time. You've got the SOCIAL and it's kind of a mindless thing where they're doing their job. They need to provide that to the broker for the broker to be able to do quotes, but there's a way to work around.
Yeah, I mean, we're also acclimated to using standard email. Your broker needs information. Your 401k vendor is doing an annual census. Send me all your employee information. Did they work more than 1,000 hours? Who's highly compensated? And sometimes, third-party administrators, TPAs, not all vendors are using secure email services, or they're not thinking about it the way that they should, or their employees aren't following their own policies. You got a deadline, you need that census information. They sent you 5 emails. Hey, when am I going to get that census? When am I going to get that year-end report from you? And so finally you do it, and then you forget to log into their secure site, or there's some. You end up sending an email. How do you hold yourself accountable? You've got to set the example for your organization on how you're protecting data, particularly if you're in a space that has any security components. So you just got to have a culture of security if you're working in that cybersecurity space. Again, access control. So the idea that, does your HR person need access to every bit of information that you have on your employees? Maybe, but maybe they don't need access to, maybe they only need access to process payroll. Does your software allow you as the owner full access to all the information, but then maybe you have less access for someone to process payroll? Or maybe your HR person only needs access to the employee benefit information. What about dependents? So now, because employers are where most people get their benefits, you have not only your employee data, but now you have their family, their dependent. Is it appropriate for your payroll HR people to have full access to everything? Just something to think about. It may not be. Maybe they only need access to run reports, and then you as an owner or as CFO, whatever your role is, has the access to do things like actually process payroll, make changes to PII, edit PII. So something to think about. Sort of talked about these already, but physical security. So I'm a big fan of going paperless, as long as you're using secure systems. So you can get rid of all the paper, but then if you're sending around unsecure spreadsheets, might as well keep the paper under lock and key. But looking at sort of how paper is managed, clean desks, how you hold people accountable, your door locks. So we have 80 people at our headquarters. I'm going to tell you a little bit of information. I trust you guys. You're not going to come to my office, right, and try to get through our doors. But right now we have a 4-digit code to get into our doors. So that gives you 10,000 different opportunities for a number, right? And our IT vendor, consultant is like, you should make it 6. You make it 6, that's 99,999, so it's 100,000, oh no, I'm getting it, it's 900, it's a million, basically, it's a million, so we would go from 10,000 different unique combinations to a million, and so it's just a matter of adding 2 extra digits. Now, our doors automatically lock at 8 and at 6, so we have that protection as well. But how is your office secured? Within our office, okay, so we have the overall building has automatic locks at 8 and 6. Inside of the office building, we have the 4-digit, soon to be 6-digit codes that you input on the doors. Within that, our HR office has a lock and key. how are you protecting that information that you have?
Does your outer doors have motion sensors to unlock when you're walking out?
They do.
Are your doors set up so you can't bypass that? Can't
They
press
are.
there?
Oh, so you can press a button?
No.
Yeah.
Press there and trip the sensor on the inside.
I love that. So we have a motion detector that unlocks it, and then you have a button across that unlocks it.
So you slide it into the app on the door, spray it, and press there on, and trip the sensor on the door.
So something to think about.
It opens your door faster than your back door. There you go.
I have to do a little test when I get back to see.
Pull it down to YouTube.
Yeah. All right.
That's the security building, like, usually coming into the actual building itself.
Yeah.
Because then-
Yeah. So I thought about spraying compressed air on the sensor to activate it. So if you turn on, so there's something to think about. So if you turn off the motion detector, you make people press the button. That's one extra layer.
And that's the point, it's layered.
Yeah.
If you get past that first, there's still another barrier.
Yeah. And that, you gotta have layers.
Usually there's two doors coming in, but if you trip.
Yeah, if they're the same exact,
And you just walk right through all the sensors.
Right.
Inside the building.
Yeah. So, yeah,
And look at how your door's set up for your HR.
it's physical. Yeah, physical lock.
Is it a deadbolt or is it a deadbolt?
oh, I don't know. I'm just saying, I'm agreeing, yeah.
Yeah. We have a deadbolt, and I'm sure there's a way to pick that lock. So, it's a really good point, right? Like nothing that I'm going to show you is 100% secure. Nothing is 100% secure. It's all about mitigating the risk, having layers. You might be able to get through the motion detector, or you might be able to compromise the outer door because of the motion detector, but now you have to come up with one of 10,000, soon to be 1 million door combinations, which gets back to PII. Are you using door combinations that are easily guessed? Is it, are you using part of the employee's social security number? Should you not? Should it be an employee number? Once you're inside of the office, what type of security do you have in the HR department? What type of drawer locks do you have? What type of paper do you have? So nothing's going to be fully secure, unfortunately, but if you layer it, it gives you different factors that people would have to compromise. Data at rest. So how is data encrypted on your network? Do you use AES encryption? How's your cloud security? What's your payroll HR vendor doing as far as encrypting your employees' data? Just ask them the question. They're probably doing something. But have you asked them the question? Are they keeping that up to date? Data in transit. When you communicate with vendors, again, secure email. They might tell you, well, we use a TLS security. Okay, what version of TLS? So as you may know, older versions of TLS are deprecated because they've been compromised. And again, access control. So it's the principle of least privilege, sort of need-to-know basis. If you give everyone access to everything, is that appropriate? What do they really need to do their job? Okay, let me think about my HR person. Well, they need to be able to input new hires, so they will need access to PII, but they may not need access to dependent information because that's being handled by our benefits person. The benefits person doesn't need to process payroll. Just think about these things. We're all so busy. It's sort of easy just to give your trusted people full access, but really, think about the principle of least privilege, sort of on a need-to-know basis. Think about that throughout your organization. Yeah.
How do you balance least privilege with the ability to maintain role-based security?
So that's where you got to look at your systems and how those are set up. In our system, we kind of struggle with that because we have role-based security. So we got a client administrator, we have the payroll processor, we got a benefits administrator. And clients will come back to us and say, well, I need this, but I also need So how granular is the security options in your systems? So role-based security is kind of the, let's think about it like a shirt size, small, medium, large. You just give people a role. Whereas, when you look at granular, you might need to look more within those different categories, within those different roles to make sure that, okay, I'm giving this person medium access, but actually I don't want them to have this. So do your systems allow for that level of granularity? Some do and some don't. And I always say start with the lowest and work your way up. So, okay. Yeah.
Now for a comment, there's another area to consider when you do that. When we look at personally identifiable information, European Union GDPR comes into play, especially for minors in gaining policy and or signatures related to minors. As to role-based, the near future is NIST 853 Reg 5. Reg 5 is in draft, and even though that's a government mandate, the requirement will take NIC's suggestion of role-based, but actually force you to consider whether your system will consider 8 to 5, 7 to 7, 6 p.m. till midnight, because the expectation is that with IA or IoT and AI, you'll have the ability to control your system looking at time, so that if Nick always works at day shift and he's looking to download privacy information at midnight, that you should be looking at him from a role-based perspective. So this is good baseline information, but you have to think about how you're going to implement it and move it to the next level.
So you said NIST 853.
Reg 5, it's in draft format.
Yeah, I think, looking at login, when people are logging in is a really important point too. Do your software systems give you user access reports? It's not on the slideshow, it's a really good point. Run an audit every month. Why is my payroll person logging in at 2 in the morning from a different IP address? Or does my system allow, there are systems that let you lock down the login times. People are only allowed to log in from 7 to 7. Again, need to know sort of least access. And okay, so they've got to work a special project and they're going to be up working until 9, 10, 11 o'clock. Maybe there's a way that you can give them temporary access. GDPR, so EU regulations, they have this sort of concept of universal jurisdiction. So, EU subject citizens, the systems they use, do you need to consider GDPR? There's a certification that you can get if you do have, concerns with presence in Europe. There's the EU-US Privacy Shield, which is something that you can get from the International Trade Association at trade.gov. So if you have vendors, because we see this in our space sometimes, we have vendors that have foreign nationals or people that work in Europe, and they want assurance that we're applying the spirit of the GDPR to our systems. So you self-certify it. It's something that you can go through and self-certify for. Europe is, those GDPR regulations are all about protecting that PII. Just questions that you might think about for your vendors. How do they document their security policies? Do they do the SOC Type 2 audits? So SOC audits, there's different types of SOC audits, but the SOC 1 is for service providers, SOC 2 is for software providers. It's just an audited document that describes how organizations have controls in their systems. How do your vendors vet their employees? Does your HR company do background checks on their own staff? So you've got all this PII, but your vendors do too. And you know, the salesperson might be nice, but what are they doing to secure your data? Do they have the Kaizen focus, continuous improvement? What do they do to train their people? So, those are questions to ask yourself and ask your vendors. And actually, I got some slides on multi-factor authentication, but I might not go into them because it's really not about PII, but it's like my public service announcement to everyone. It's so easy to turn on multi-factor authentication. It's the simplest way to secure your data. So, set it up. If you use Office 365, it's just a setting within Office 365. You get, a text to your phone. I'm in the payroll space, so I always remind people about things to think about when it comes to payroll. How are you enabling self-service access? How are you allowing your employees to make direct deposit changes, address changes, tax changes? If you have a system that they can log in securely with multi-factor authentication to make a direct deposit change, now they're not emailing your HR staff asking for direct deposit change. We get emails all the time from, again, it looks like it's from the CEO. Hey, I got a new bank account. I'm traveling. Can you make this change for me real quick? Our staff knows better. We're not going to do those changes. But our clients are busy and they may not think about these things. And so we always encourage them to use our system or use a secure system. You don't have to use us, of course. But what are you using to make sure that changes to PII are being done securely? Do you have a culture of doing that through a secure system? Or is your culture on email? And what kind of vulnerabilities does that leave you open to? How do you get voice confirmation? Maybe you don't have a system. Maybe you're not at that scale yet. You got 5 employees, you're all in the same office. You don't need a whole system to do this. Okay, but are you going to make a direct deposit change by email alone? What do you need? Do you need voice confirmation? Look at your reporting. This is specifically about payroll, but how do you audit changes? We always tell our people in the payroll space to look at, what new employees are on your system? What direct deposit changes have been made? It kind of brings me to the end of the slides I want to talk about. So, basically, you got a responsibility to protect the data. Your employees trust you. You don't want to have a PR crisis with your employees. You want them to know that you trust, that you value them. You want to do right by your folks. You want to protect their information. Questions, comments? All right. Thank you all for your time. Appreciate
About
it.
the airport, you were saying you would
Oh, yes.
He was like, don't throw that out.
We were coming back from the airport, the bag tag, it has your name printed on it, the barcode, and what kind of information it gets back to printed information. How do you secure things that you might not even think about? Your luggage tag.
Do not put that way at the airport.
Think about that stuff. All right, thank you all for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.